Draug, Volume 2. The apartment was empty when Gordon Rowe returned home. His mother had left a message on the answering machine. She would be working late at her Toronto office and wouldn't be home before 11 o'clock. That suited Rowe fine. He found he wanted some alone time after committing murder. His previous exaltation had given way to depression and exhaustion. He just wanted to lie down, to sleep. He lay down on his bed, just for a moment, fully dressed, and fell instantly into a deep sleep. A deep sleep. A deep sleep. Sleep. He arose, and without thinking, left the apartment to follow the dark streets he had previously traversed, returning to the downtown, returning to the pier. Rowe tried to stop, to turn around, but found he could not. Something was compelling him to return to the scene of the crime. What do they always say? The criminal always returns to the scene of the crime? The murderer always returns to the scene of the crime? Rowe was positively running now, over the bridge and past the Centennial Library, and across Lakeshore Road and down Navy Street, and then the park, and then he was running down the pier, slipping and sliding on the wet concrete, running and running towards the lighthouse, to the lighthouse, to the lighthouse. Rowe finally halted at the very end of the pier and found himself staring out towards the dark, heaving water. 100 yards out, a human figure broke the surface of the water, hands raised in rage and agony. Jenkins? Jenkins? And then Rowe saw that it was Jenkins, and that he held in his right hand, raised high, an incongruous object. A bicycle pump. A blood-stained metal bicycle pump. As Rowe watched, in palpitating horror, the figure rose to the surface of the water and began to shamble across it, towards him, waving the bike pump like a club and screeching in a distorted, high-pitched voice, "Frat boy, you die! Frat boy, you die! You die! Die!" Rowe attempted to back away and came up against the red concrete base of the lighthouse. Jenkins appeared to be floating instead of his usual limping, and he stepped directly onto the pier. Wet rat tails framed his corpse face, and Rowe was appalled to see his head and shoulders were draped with seaweed. Jenkins raised the bicycle pump, which dripped thick red blood, opened his sour mouth, which emitted a mingled stench of wine, puke, and death, and croaked, "I'm gonna lay a beating on yous, frat boy. I'm going to lay a beating on yous." And he brought down the bike pump, spraying Rowe with gore. And he shrieked and sat up in bed. It took a few moments for Rowe's heartbeat to return to normal. And he was so wet, so drenched in perspiration, it felt like he had pissed himself, or had fallen into the sullen waters of the lake. Fortunately, it was only 10:30, and his mother was still at work. He wasn't sure he could explain his behavior to her without obviously lying. But then, she was up to her elbows in projections and quarterly reports and meetings, and didn't really have time to pay him much attention. Rowe cleaned himself, changed the sheets, lay down, and shut his eyes. Hey, Frat! Rowe sat up on the edge of the bed. He didn't stand up, as he wasn't sure he could stand up without collapsing. He waited expectantly in the dark and was about to lie back down when once again, "Hey, Frat!" The voice had a metallic, far-away quality, almost like it was a recording. But even if it was definitely Jenkins. "Hey, Frat!" When he felt strong enough, Rowe went to the window and peered through a crack in the curtains at the street below. There was no one there, no pedestrians, just the usual passing cars. Rowe lay back down. He heard the unearthly voice a few more times, but eventually he passed out and dreamt of gray-green waves rising and falling on a stormy sea. Dark waters, waves, the lake, and Jenkins, always Jenkins, out of the corner of his eye. Jenkins. The next few days at school were awful. Instead of experiencing relief, Rowe felt someone was always watching him, someone just out of sight. Several times, Rowe was certain he could see a slight, stalking figure in a black leather jacket, off in the distance, but when he focused, there was nothing, no one there. At other times, he heard Jenkins calling him, but again, when he looked closely, there was no one there. Rowe also found that he was afraid of the water. Of water. Especially the lake. Even a glimpse of the lake in the distance, with its gray-green waters, made him apprehensive. One warm Sunday afternoon, after homework at the library, Amy, a girl he had a crush on, suggested they go for a walk down by the shore, maybe even take a stroll onto the pier. A stroll on the pier. The pier. The pier. The pier. Rowe broke into a cold sweat and hastily excused himself. He was turning green. He excused himself, saying he had to be home soon. I have to be home soon. So much for Amy. There would be other girls. He hoped. Mirrors were a problem now, too. When he was shaving or brushing his teeth, or even examining a zit, he kept expecting Jenkins' ugly face to pop up behind him. And then came the beating. He was walking home from the library after dark when an old Mercury meteor drew up beside him, and he was hustled into the back seat, a filthy blanket thrown over his head. They took him to the flats and beat him senseless. One of them was using a baseball bat. As he lay face down in the wet dirt, one of them kicked him in the ribs, hard, and sneered, "That was for Ab, frat boy." He spent a week in hospital. He told the police he didn't know who they were. But of course, he recognized them, recognized their voices. Some local hoods, guys that hung around street corners or the hotels. And friends of Ab. Ab. Did they know? Did they know? Or did they only know that Ab hated him? Did they know he had killed? But no one knew Ab had been murdered. Luckily, his body hadn't washed ashore. Otherwise, they would have seen the marks of the beating, the broken fingers. But for now, Ab was just a missing person. There were stories about him in the paper, missing persons posters, but no body. Luckily, no body. Yeah, lucky for me, Rowe thought. Lucky. But at the same time, it creeped him out. Knowing Ab was still out there, unaccounted for. His body still unaccounted for. Even if he was dead. He was always seeing something. Someone out of the corner of his eye. Ab! Could he come back? Had he come back? Was he stalking him? After a few days, Rowe's mother, during a visit, told him, "I've come to a decision, Gordy," she said. She had always called him Gordy, which he hated. "I've been offered a job at our Calgary office, and I said yes. It would be a promotion and a lot more money. I didn't think you'd be too disappointed. I've had the impression you weren't really happy here. We would have to leave before the end of the school year, but..." Rowe made some disappointed sounds. After all, it was expected. But secretly, he was delighted. "Goodbye, Ab. I'm 2,000 miles away. Ha!" After she left, the sheer relief put Rowe to sleep. But in the middle of the night, something woke him up. The lights were out in both the room and in the hallway beyond the open door, but he could sense a shadowy figure standing out in the passage, and he was overwhelmed by the funky, fishy tang he immediately recognized as the smell of the lake. The figure stepped into the room. It was Ab. "You're coming with me, frat boy. You're coming with me. Down under the dark water." He pounced and dragged Rowe from the bed, pulling out all sorts of wires and setting off alarms. Rowe screamed as he hit the floor, and then the nurses were in the room, and Ab had vanished. It was an hallucination, brought on by pain meds, they said. But that didn't explain all the water on the floor and the overpowering reek of the lake. Rowe checked out of the hospital in the morning. By the end of the week, he was in Alberta. "Goodbye, Ab. So long, loser. I'm gone, and I'm never coming back. Never. So in future, let's not meet." This story is to be continued.